In voiceover, Irish-American mobster Blunt Costello, Jack Nicholson, makes sense of that he would rather not be the result of his current circumstance. He maintains that his current circumstance should be a result of him. Grainy authentic film portrays rough mobs in Boston during prior ages. Costello, gladly Irish, proudly bigoted, makes sense of that. What irritates him about African Americans is their refusal to understand that they won't be given anything. Costello's conviction is you need to do whatever conceivable to take what you need. Costello is in a little general store and gathers security cash from the retailer, a man noticeably startled by Costello. Costello cautions him to have more cash sometime later. Costello asks the retailer's young teen girl behind the counter on the off chance that she has her period yet. His disposition is casual and even more compromising for it. The little girl is both insulted and constrained by the strong Costello and addresses his non-serious inquiry. The retailer shows no inclination. A little child, a youthful Colin Sullivan, Connor Donovan, witnesses Costello's communication with the retailer. Costello sees him and inquires as to whether he's the child of a man Costello knows. He advises the storekeeper to give the kid 2 full sacks of food and afterward squeezes a few coins into the kid's hand. He advises the memorable kid he can get additional cash from Costello when he progresses in years. As Sullivan comes up in age, Costello grooms him and steers him into a task as a cop, where he can keep Costello informed. Sullivan moves on from the Police Institute and is promptly moved to the Massachusetts State Police Force. He is acknowledged into the Unique Examinations Unit drove by LRB, Alec Baldwin, which centers around coordinated wrongdoing. The essential objective of the unit is Costello. Sullivan, Matt Damon, is heartily invited onto the state police force by Skipper Queenan, Sheen, and Staff Sergeant Dignam, Wahlberg. Billy Costigan, DiCaprio, whose more distant family has significant connections to coordinated wrongdoing, likewise goes to the Police Institute. Before he graduates, he is brought to a gathering with Queenan and Dignam who scare, menace, and verbally irritate him. They pressure him to preclude himself as an official since he's too savvy to be in any way a cop and due to his family's connections to wrongdoing. At the point when Costigan confronts their preliminaries, they change strategies. They extend to him an employment opportunity as a cop on one condition: that he quit the Foundation, serve serious time in prison on an exaggerated attack charge, and penetrate Costello's association. Just Queenan and Dignam will realize that Costigan is working secret. They guarantee him a reward when he finishes the task. At the point when Costigan escapes jail, he contacts his cousin and attempts to fund a medication bargain. Costigan and his cousin meet Mr. French, Beam Winstone, at a neighborhood bar, where Costigan orders a cranberry juice. The person on the bar stool close to him inquires as to whether he is having his period. Costigan crushes a lager mug over the man's head and is stopped. Mr. French. Mr. French cautions Costigan that he isn't permitted to thrash specific men, and he's fortunate the person at the bar isn't one of them. Eating at the counter of a store like that in which Sullivan initially met Costello, Costigan stands up to 2 Italian mobsters from Provision blackmailing security cash from the storekeeper. He pummels the 2 men gravely, breaking his hand when he hits one of them. Costello learns of Costigan's activities and requests him to a gathering. He offers to shield Costigan from the mafia, who, he guarantees, will get back with fortifications to kill Costigan. He welcomes Costigan into a back room where he trains Mr. French, a senior individual from Costello's team, to really take a look at Costigan for weapons or a wire. Mr. French tears Costigan's cast open and Costello beats Costigan's wrecked hand with a shoe, attempting to inspire him to admit being a cop. Costigan endures their beating and is acknowledged as a genuine criminal by Costello. Both Sullivan and Costigan gain validity inside their particular associations. Sullivan visits a crime location where the 2 mafia men from Fortune are found. Sullivan contacts Costello, who guides him to impact the specialists from Costello. Sullivan starts dating specialist Madeline Incense, Vera Farmiga. Costigan likewise sees her, however, as a client, expected under the particulars of his probation. He likewise fosters a fascination with her. During an arrangement to offer taken rocket direction CPUs to Chinese government specialists, Sullivan cautions Costello of the police activity and everybody evades police recognition by boarding boats holding up at the rear of the stockroom. It becomes obvious to both Sullivan and Costigan that there is a mole in one another's association, however their characters still up in the air. Costigan converses with Dignam and takes steps to leave, however Dignam advises him to think of proof so they can track down the mole. Incredibly fomented, Costigan yields. He has espresso with Goad, who intends to move in with Sullivan. Costello advises Sullivan to see as the rodent among his team. Sullivan requests his team individuals' government-managed retirement numbers and different types of ID so he can find them. Costigan looks for the witness and gains from an individual from Costello's group that Costello himself is a FBI source, making sense of why government examiners over and over neglect to prosecute and capture Costello. Costigan visits Queenan at home late around evening time and lets him know that Costello is a FBI source. Mr. French gathers everybody's government-backed retirement numbers and other ID. Costigan amends Fitzgibbons, David O'Hara, incorrect spelling of residence on the envelope containing their data, and afterward leaves. He visits Rankle at her loft, where she is getting done with moving out. She lets him know she is moving in with Sullivan. They talk and afterward have intercourse. Ellerby places Sullivan responsible for the examination to track down the mole in the Extraordinary Examinations Unit, referring to his flawless record. Costigan follows Costello to a pornography theater, where he sees Costello meet with and give a dull figure, obscure to him, Sullivan, the envelope containing Costello's team individuals' very own data. Costigan pursues Sullivan out the crisis exit of the theater and through Chinatown, however neither one of the men learns the other's personality. Sullivan advises Costello to trail Queenan to a gathering with Costigan. Costigan moves away before Costello's men lose Queenan the rooftop, arrival at Costigan's feet. As Costello's group leaves, Costigan goes along with them, imagining he's simply shown up to go along with them in the death. Delahant, imprint Rolston, is mortally injured. Back at their bar, Delahant fingers Costigan as the mole however bites the dust before he can tell any other person. A news report uncovers that Delahant, a team part, was a secret cop. Thus, Dignam is compelled to step down from the police force. Utilizing Queenan's telephone, Sullivan arrives at Costigan, and neglects to convince him to stop his work as a mole. Sullivan gains from Queenan's journal that Costello was a source for the Government Department of Examination. He stresses that his way of life as a mole for Costello might be uncovered. With Costigan's assistance, Costello is followed by the police to a cocaine get, where a gunfight emits between his team and police, during which a large portion of Costello's group are killed. Sullivan faces the injured Costello, who concedes he is an intermittent FBI source. Sullivan shoots him on numerous occasions. Sullivan is praised the following day for having killed Costello by everybody on the power. Sincerely, Costigan comes to see him, trying to get his regular citizen character re-established and to gather his back pay. He tells Sullivan he plans to continue his non-military personnel life. Sullivan passes on to look into Costigan's representative record when Costigan sees the envelope from Costello directly in front of Sullivan. Costigan at long last acknowledges Sullivan as Costello's mole. Getting back to his work area, Sullivan understands that Costigan has sorted out his actual character, so he deletes Costigan's representative records from the police PC framework. Madeline tells Sullivan she's pregnant, however doesn't uncover who the dad is. A couple of days after the fact, she gets a bundle via the post office from Costigan addressed to Sullivan. She opens it to find it contains a compact disc of Costello's recorded discussions with Sullivan. Sullivan strolls in as she is tuning in and tries and fails to mollify her doubts. He contacts Costigan, who uncovers that Costello recorded each discussion he had with Sullivan. Costello left the accounts with his lawyer, who has given them to Costigan. Costigan says he needs his regular citizen character back or he will ensnare Sullivan. They consent to meet on the top of a similar structure where Queenan was killed. At the point when they meet, Costigan surprises Sullivan and cuffs him. As Costigan had furtively organized, official Brown, Anderson, shows up on the rooftop too. Stunned to see Sullivan in cuffs and held at gunpoint by Costigan, Earthy Colored pulls his firearm on Costigan. Costigan makes sense of his activities by uncovering that Sullivan is the mole. Costigan asks Brown for what reason Dignam didn't go with him, however Brown doesn't reply. Costigan drives Sullivan to the lift and Earthy Colored uses the stairwell to follow them. At the point when the lift arrives at the ground floor and the entryways open, official Berrigan, Dale, shoots Costigan in the head. At the point when Brown shows up, Berrigan kills him as well. Berrigan uncovers to Sullivan that Costello had more than one mole in the police and that Costello planned to surrender the two of them to the FBI. At the point when Berrigan immediately turns, Sullivan shoots him in the head. At Police Central Command, Sullivan prepares a story to safeguard himself, distinguishing Berrigan as the mole and suggests Costigan for the decoration of legitimacy. At Costigan's burial service, Sullivan and Madeline stand by the grave. Sullivan endeavors to converse with her, yet she overlooks him. As Sullivan enters his condo, he is met by Dignam, who shoots and kills him. As the edge floats up to the window in the gold vault of the Massachusetts State House behind the scenes, a rodent rushes along the gallery railing.